Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming your way. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I want to know how far this story has reached. No more waiting. Let's get into the video.
The void around Aelyr'S V was thick with smoke and silence. Burnt metal and twisted debris spiraled in lazy orbit, the remnants of a battle that had lasted only 12 minutes but left over 3,000 lives extinguished or broken. One of those fragments wasn't a ship. It was a man. Sergeant Kael Ardent's escape pod drifted into the magnetic pull of Ravalon 9, a neutral interspecies medical station. The pod had no signal, no energy, only a single biosign faintly pulsing. Inside, Kael's body was broken, his breath shallow, blood trailing upward in beads across the low-grav interior. His dog tags vibrated softly as the pod docked, a subtle metallic chime echoing through the corridor. Human male, mid-30s, military insignia, critical condition, announced a tri-limbed medic, pushing the pod toward the triage bay. Station lights flickered white-blue, sterile, humming. The air carried the scent of ozone and synthetic antiseptics, with a faint undercurrent of blood. Kael was unconscious, unaware of the foreign hands touching his skin, scanning his organs, pumping in nanobots to stabilize him. "Assign him to Wing Delta," came the voice of the duty nurse. A tall, porcelain-skinned being with violet eyes that didn't blink. Her name was Serenya, a medical officer of the Aelyr'S species, renowned for their cold efficiency and devotion to the Galactic Medical Codex. She scanned his form, her long fingers hovering over his chest as his vitals spiked suddenly. Her expression shifted. A small wrinkle appeared between her delicate brows. Unusual sympathetic reaction in the nervous system. Possibly organ failure. She paused. Uncertainty was rare for her. She tapped her comm link. "Dr. Varen, I am seeing an erratic response in this human's lower abdomen. Elevated blood flow, muscular tension. Possible trauma?" There was a pause. A dry laugh came through the comm. "Ah, no trauma, Nurse Serenya. That's just a human thing. Perfectly normal." Serenya blinked. The misunderstanding hung in the air like static. She stared at Kael again. Still, broken, but not as she thought. With a soft hum, the medbed began to move toward Recovery Bay 3. The nurse followed, her eyes now curious and uneasy. Something about this human was different. The medical bay was dimly lit, its illumination designed to accommodate patients with photosensitive retinas. Bioluminescent panels lined the curved ceiling, pulsing softly in shades of green and gold. Machines hummed in silence, speaking a language of beeps and electrochemical feedback that only trained personnel could truly understand. Serenya stood still beside Kael Ardent's recovery capsule, her silver robes flowing like liquid under the station's artificial gravity. A data pad floated beside her, displaying the man's vitals in real time. She watched, her expression composed, eyes narrowed. The earlier incident during triage lingered in her mind, that strange biological reaction. She'd seen hundreds of species in critical condition. She'd patched up reptilian blood vessels, rewired neural tendrils, and even stabilized a living gas entity. But humans, they were still so poorly understood, even after decades of galactic integration. And this one, Kael, was triggering something. Not in the instruments, but in her. "Why did your body respond as if in mating readiness during organ scan?" she asked softly, mostly to herself. She had reviewed 3 xenomedical manuals. The phenomenon she observed was called erection, a term accompanied by bizarre human anatomical diagrams and footnotes referencing emotional, not physical, stimuli. Illogical. Frustrated, she paced. Her mind returned to the Galactic Medical Codex, a document sacred to Aelyr'S healers. It forbade emotional involvement, and especially warned against species entanglement. Objectivity ensured precision. Precision preserved life. And yet, the human's face, even bruised and bloodied, seemed peaceful. Or was that merely a projection of her curiosity? Footsteps approached. Dr. Varen entered, his tall form casting a long shadow. "You're still observing him?" "I'm ensuring his stability," Serenya answered too quickly. Varen's gaze lingered on her a moment too long. Stability doesn't require 4 hours of silent observation. Be cautious, Serenya. Humans. Unsettle even the most disciplined minds. She said nothing, only nodded. When he left, she turned back to Kael. He stirred, a subtle movement, a twitch of a finger. Her heart skipped, a strange, fluttering sensation in her upper thoracic chamber. She placed a hand gently on his forehead. His skin was warm. So warm. A whisper escaped her lips, unintentionally. You are not what I expected. Outside, beyond the observation dome, 2 stars flared in binary dance, colliding light reflected in the polished glass of Kael's medpod. Kael Ardent opened his eyes to the quiet hum of machines and a dim scent unfamiliar light. For a long moment, he didn't know where he was. The ceiling above him pulsed faintly, soft green hues drifting like the inside of an ocean. He blinked. Everything ached. His lungs stung with recycled oxygen. His voice cracked. Hello? No answer. Just the steady beep of his vitals and the subtle scent of sterilized air, tinged with something metallic, like the hull of a warship after re-entry. He tried to sit up, but pain lanced through his spine. A hiss escaped his lips. Then movement. Soft footsteps, measured, approaching with a kind of grace he couldn't quite place. She entered like a shadow from another world, tall, serene, beautiful in an alien way that made his breath catch. Skin the color of pale starlight, eyes large, violet, luminous, no weapons, no fear, just observation. You are awake, she said, her voice smooth like wind through leaves. Your body resisted nanite integration. We had to proceed carefully. Kael swallowed. Where am I? Station Ravelon 9, a neutral zone. You were recovered after the orbital strike near Aelyr'S V. He blinked. I made it. You did. Barely. There was a silence between them. He studied her, not just her appearance, but the way she stood, hands folded, every motion precise, controlled. She didn't fidget like humans. No wasted movements. You're not human, he said. I am Aelyr'S, medical designation Serenya, assigned to your care. Her name sat oddly on his tongue, like a forgotten dream. Serenya. Right. He winced as another wave of pain shot down his leg. Feels like I got hit by a meteor. Close. A shockwave from a plasma burst fractured your lower spine. We've stabilized it, but you will require physical retraining. Kael gave a weak smile. Lucky me. She didn't return it. Instead, she approached his bedside and pressed her fingers to a panel. A soft pulse of light scanned his frame. Then, without looking at him, she asked, Why does your body respond to touch in such unpredictable ways? Kael coughed, surprised. You mean, wait, what? She tilted her head slightly, as if studying a specimen. Your physiology is difficult to interpret. He laughed, despite the pain. You're not the first to say that. The rehabilitation chamber was built for versatility, adjustable gravity, modular terrain, temperature zones, a space designed to heal across species, to retrain broken bodies from all corners of the galaxy. For Kael, it felt like a cage. He sat at the edge of a sloped bench, one hand gripping the rail, jaw clenched. His legs still refused to obey him. Across the chamber, Serenya observed in silence, hands behind her back. She hadn't offered words of encouragement. That wasn't the Aelyr'S way. But she had volunteered for this duty, against Dr. Veyron's subtle warnings. I don't think I'm made for this kind of therapy, Kael muttered, trying and failing to lift his left leg. Feels more like military punishment. Discipline and recovery share structural parallels, Serenya said flatly. Kael glanced at her. You always talk like that. Serenya tilted her head. Like what? Like you're narrating a scientific journal. She approached. Her movements, as always, were measured, efficient. Emotion clouds, efficiency. He chuckled. That why you keep looking at me like I'm a malfunctioning weapon? I study your reactions. Right. For science. A pause stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the chamber's support systems. Then, unexpectedly, Serenya stepped closer and knelt beside him. Her fingers brushed his knee, just above the scarred skin and sensor leads. He flinched at the sudden touch. You fear pain, she said softly. Kael's eyes hardened. Everyone does. She nodded slowly. But not everyone hides it the same way. Their eyes met. For a moment, the chamber around them faded, replaced by the quiet intensity of that look. There was no species, no war, no protocol, just presence. Then, Kael leaned slightly forward, breath catching. "Why do you care?" he asked, voice barely audible. Serenya stood swiftly, as if startled by her own proximity. "I don't," she replied, too quickly. "I am fulfilling my assignment." She turned and walked toward the control panel, but her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the settings. Kael watched her go. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me neither." The chamber lights dimmed. Somewhere far off, two artificial stars rotated in slow dance beyond the observation glass, just like them, always near, never touching. The days blurred into each other. Progress came in inches. Kael's body resisted, but his spirit didn't. Not anymore. Not with Serenya at his side. Each session in the rehabilitation dome brought new pain and new milestones. First a muscle twitch, then a controlled lift, then a shaky step supported by gravity belts and Serenya's steady hands. It was during one of these sessions that everything changed. The dome was bathed in the amber glow of a nearby red dwarf, casting long shadows through the observation glass. Kael stood balanced between two support bars, sweat trickling down his brow, arms trembling. "I can't," he hissed through clenched teeth. "You can," Serenya said simply, standing close. "You don't know that. I have measured your biochemical output. You can." Kael laughed weakly. "You're charming, you know that." Then he faltered, one leg giving out beneath him. Serenya lunged forward instinctively, catching him before he hit the padded floor. He landed against her chest, breath ragged, face pressed to the curve of her neck. For a moment, they were entangled. Heartbeat against heartbeat, species against species, vulnerability laid bare. Neither moved. Her breath caught. His hands found her arms, and not in desperation, but in grounding. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Kael pulled back to meet her eyes. Their faces were inches apart. And then, it happened. A kiss. Unexpected. Brief. Intense. Not passion, not lust. Something deeper. A signal between survivors. Serenya froze. Kael pulled away, his expression flickering with both shock and apology. She didn't slap him. She didn't step back, but her voice came low and cold. "You have compromised the boundaries of patient-caregiver protocol." Kael nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did. I should report this." "I know." She stood, stepping away with perfect posture, the contact broken. But as she turned to leave, Kael spoke again. "It wasn't just me. You felt it too." She paused. Silence. Then, "Your session is over." And she was gone. Alone in the dim amber light, Kael lowered himself back to the bench. His legs trembled, but he didn't collapse. Because even with her gone, something had shifted. And once the boundary between stars is breached, gravity always pulls harder. The next time Serenya entered Recovery Bay 3, the silence between them was louder than the station's endless hum. She moved like always, graceful, efficient, immaculate. But there was something clipped in her motion, something sharper in the way her eyes refused to meet his. Kael sat upright on the medical bench, legs crossed, data pad in his lap. No training today, just stillness. "I've been reading," he said, breaking the silence. Serenya paused, one hand hovering over the diagnostics panel. "On what?" "Your people. Aelyr'S philosophy. The Codex." She glanced at him. "And? Cold, precise, controlled. Everything by law. No deviation, no error. That's why we survive," she said flatly. Kael lifted the data pad, flipping to a page. "But then I found this. Aelyr'S proverb. Circa the Kithen Reformation. What the law forbids, the soul remembers." Her expression cracked, just slightly. "That's not taught in medical training." "I figured," Kael said, eyes fixed on her. "But maybe you should have read it before kissing a human." She tensed. "You kissed me." He smiled. "You didn't pull away." Serenya turned sharply toward the display, fingers dancing over the interface. Too fast. Too controlled. You don't understand the consequences. I know what I felt. That's irrelevant, she snapped. He stood, slowly, painfully, but on his own. Is it? Because I've had my ribs crushed, spine fractured, lungs collapsed, and nothing ever scared me more than being alone in that escape pod, thinking I'd die and no one would remember I existed. Her back was still to him. I didn't need protocol. I needed someone to see me. Finally, she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. And I did. The silence stretched again. Then, quietly, Serenya walked to a storage alcove and pulled out a small case. Inside it were items Kael hadn't seen before. Human objects, photos, a folded piece of paper, a battered book of poetry. These were in your uniform, she said. I wasn't supposed to open them, but I did. Her fingers touched the cover of the book, its title, Words from a Dying World. I read them, she said. The metaphors, the longing. I didn't understand it. Until, Kael stepped closer. Until now, she finished. Between them, something hung unspoken. Not forbidden, simply waiting. Ravelon 9's artificial night cycle cloaked the medical wing in a soft indigo glow. The station, always humming, seemed quieter, as if it, too, were holding its breath. Serenya stood alone in her quarters, the poetry book still in her hands. Kael's scent clung faintly to its pages, something earthy and strange, like burned air and leather. She had read the lines again and again. Human verse was illogical, but it moved her. A knock at the panel startled her. The door hissed open. Dr. Veyron. His eyes were sharp tonight. I ran an access audit, he said without greeting. You retrieved the human's personal items outside of authorized procedure. You've been in recovery bay far beyond your assigned hours. And patients talk. Serenya. Serenya stood still, unblinking. Have I broken any code? No, he said slowly. But you're circling the edge of several. His gaze softened just enough to reveal something worse than anger. Disappointment. You're not a naive apprentice anymore. The Codex exists for a reason. When we begin to care, we begin to lose objectivity. She met his gaze. Then let me be clear. I have not lost my objectivity, but I have gained understanding. Veyron exhaled sharply. And what happens when the Council hears of this connection? What happens to your position? To your reputation? Serenya said nothing. You are one of the finest Aelyr'S practitioners in 3 sectors. Don't throw that away because a human smiled at you. It wasn't a smile, she said. It was a wound. Veyron stepped back, eyes narrowing. You've already chosen, haven't you? I have chosen to feel, and to listen. With a final glance, he turned and left, not slamming the door, but letting it close with a final, quiet hiss that felt heavier than a shout. Later that night, Kael waited in the garden dome, the place where every species was allowed one tree, one plot of soil from their homeworld. He sat beneath Earth's red maple, its transplanted leaves catching the artificial wind. When Serenya arrived, her face was unreadable. They know, she said simply. Kael nodded. Then let them. She stepped closer. I don't know how this ends. He reached out, palm up. Then let's write the rest together. She hesitated, then took his hand, and for the first time, didn't let go. They were caught, not by whispers, not by data trails, by presence. 2 figures, one human and one Aelyr'S. Too close, too still, too intimate, in the biostation's garden dome, under stars that weren't real but still watched. Security didn't interrupt. They didn't have to. The report had already been filed. By morning, Serenya stood in front of the Intergalactic Medical Ethics Tribunal. 3 beings from 3 systems, each a master of detachment. Her posture was perfect. Her pulse was not. Kael wasn't allowed in the hearing. She stood alone. Dr. Veyron was there, reluctantly, not as her enemy, not as her protector, as a witness. You violated tenets of Article 12A, intoned the Zintari chair being, its voice like glass shattering. Your patient was emotionally compromised, and you allowed personal attachment to override medical neutrality. I did, Serenya said calmly. The chamber murmured. Even Veyron's eyes widened. The second arbiter leaned forward. You admit it? I do not deny connection. I deny only that it was harmful. Another murmur, louder now. Then, without being summoned, the doors opened. Kael stood there, still favoring his recovering legs, still bruised, but whole. I requested no interference, the Zintari snapped. Kael didn't flinch. You'll hear me, or I'll shout loud enough that half the station listens anyway. The silence that followed was heavy. My recovery didn't come from medicine alone, he said. It came from her. Her empathy, her willingness to see me as more than muscle and bone. The third arbiter, a being composed entirely of light pulses, flickered rapidly. Are you suggesting emotional entanglement is now a treatment method? Kael stepped closer. I'm saying that what you call entanglement, I call survival. You speak of objectivity like it's purity, but objectivity never held my hand while I remembered how to walk. The room fell silent. The tribunal conferred. Voices in neural link, minds linked across quantum space. After long minutes, the Zintari looked back at Serenya. We will not remove your license. Serenya exhaled, quietly. But you will carry a disciplinary note for breach of protocol. This is not a precedent. It is an exception. Varen stood slowly, nodded once. Outside the hearing chamber, Kael met Serenya in silence. They didn't tear us apart, he said. No, she replied. They simply acknowledged that we already were together. News travels fast in space. By the next rotation, whispers of the tribunal's decision had spread beyond Ravalon 9, carried on encrypted diplomatic channels and gossip between medtechs, engineers, even smugglers docked for repairs. A nurse from the Garrix enclave called it historic. A Threxian scientist dismissed it as emotional contamination. But to others, to the silent ones watching from the edges of the Galactic Council, it was something far more dangerous. Proof. Proof that a human and an Aelyr'S could connect beyond protocol, beyond anatomy, beyond law. Proof that empathy wasn't a weakness of species, but a bridge between them. Inside the medwing, things returned to routine, at least on the surface. Kael's recovery advanced faster than projected. He no longer needed assistance to walk, and the pain was now only a dull ghost of what it had been. He visited the Garden Dome more often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Serenya. Sometimes, they didn't speak, and didn't need to, but not everyone celebrated. Late one cycle, Serenya received a message routed through diplomatic channels. A coded symbol blinked once, a spiral of white within a red triangle. Her breath caught. The Aelyr'S Council. Kael found her in her quarters, sitting by the dim glow of her datapad, the message still open. They're summoning you. She nodded. For review. Not punishment. Not openly, but consequences. He sat beside her, silent for a while. Then, do you regret this? Us. She looked at him, really looked, and in his eyes she saw something no tribunal could catalog. Truth without calculation. No, she said, but I regret the world isn't ready for it. Then let's make it ready, Kael said, standing. We faced war. We faced protocol. Now we face perception. And what would we do? He turned to her, smiling. We'll show them. Not with arguments. With living proof. She stared at him for a moment, then slowly rose to her feet. What are you planning, human? Kael took her hand. A symbol. Something bigger than us. Something they can't ignore. Outside, the stars shifted above the dome, vast and burning, and beneath that artificial sky, two figures, once isolated by biology, by law, by distance, now stood united, not just as survivor and healer, but as something entirely new. The Garden Dome had never been so full. Representatives from over 30 species stood in solemn assembly beneath the false sky of Ravalon 9. The dome lights had been dimmed, and in their place, an aurora shimmered overhead, a symbolic gesture of unity, woven from light spectrums visible across all known ocular ranges. At the center of the gathering stood Kael Ardent, dressed in the formal uniform of the United Terran Forces, scars still etched across his face like history written in flesh. Beside him stood Serenya, her ceremonial Aelyr'S robe flowing like liquid starlight, her expression composed, yet electric beneath the surface. Before them was a patch of untouched soil, bordered in crystal. the site of the Unity Grove, a tradition where species planted trees in memory of the fallen. But today, there was no memory. There was promise. Kael knelt first. In his hands, a sapling, a red maple from Earth, its leaves trembling despite the still air. "Not a monument," he said, voice carrying. "A beginning." He pressed the roots into the soil. Serenya followed, placing a vial beside it, not of water, but of nutrients crafted from the Aelyr'S homeworld, calibrated to sustain the tree in this artificial climate. A symbol not of control, but cooperation. When they stood again, the gathered assembly was silent. Then the representative from the Threxian Science Guild stepped forward and spoke. "This violates no law. It honors a truth. Species adapt. Perhaps the code must do the same." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. In the distance, the tribunal members watched, impassive but present. That alone meant everything. Kael turned to Serenya. "You know what I'm about to do?" "I've calculated the probabilities," she replied. He smiled. "Let's defy them together." He reached into his coat, pulled a small case, opened it. Inside, not a ring, not a chain, but a woven cord, part Terran silk, part Aelyr'S fiber, braided together by hand. He held it up. "Serenya of Aelyr'S," he said, voice steady. "Will you join with me, not just in life, but in purpose? As one symbol, one defiance, one beginning." She took the cord. "Yes." As they bound their hands together, the garden erupted in soft applause, wings rustling, limbs clapping, energy fields pulsing in harmony. And above them, the maple's leaves shimmered, red, silver, and gold. A new tree, a new code, a new future.